As I'm sure you're well aware, institutions vary from one country to another. Have you ever wondered what these primaries, caucuses, or Super Tuesdays are about? Here is the answer in the American Presidential Election System Explained. Well, the first question to answer is, who can vote? All US citizens who are of age, meaning that they are 18 years old or over, have to be registered to vote. And they also have to meet their state's requirements, which means they must not be in prison or mentally incapacitated. If there's going to be an election, we need candidates, right? Okay, so who can be a candidate? Candidates to the American presidential election must be natural-born American citizens, aged at least 35 years old and having resided in the country for a minimum of 14 years. A requirement of $5,000 raised or spent for the campaign also exists before they can register with the Federal Election Committee. Now, let's start with the tough part, the election process. The first step, because of course there are several steps, is when primaries and caucuses are held in each state. Primaries are held by state or local governments, and voting for a party's candidate happens through a secret ballot. Caucuses are private meetings run by political parties, during which party members make speeches to support the different candidates in order to influence the vote that follows. The day when the greatest number of states hold primaries and caucuses is called the Super Tuesday. Step 2 of the election process is the national conventions. These conventions finalize the party's choice for the presidential and vice presidential nominees. That is what is called the ticket. Once chosen, the nominees campaign throughout the country to win the support of the general population. And now for step 3, which is the general election in itself. In the United States of America, the president is not elected directly by the population. There, voters actually choose electors who will be members of the Electoral College. Each state gets a certain number of electors based on the number of representatives in Congress. To put it in a nutshell, the more populated a state is, the more electors represent them. And that is the specificity of America. Indeed, the American election system is a winner takes it all, which means that the candidate who wins the most popular vote in each state wins all these states' electoral votes. And that leads us to our fourth and last step in the electoral system of the USA. In all, there are 538 electors. The candidate who gets more than half electoral votes, that is to say 270 votes, wins and becomes the new president. The electoral system of the winner takes it all, that was explained before, allows a situation in which a candidate may have had the majority of popular vote, but that candidate will not win the election. And that is exactly what happened in 2016. Indeed, as we can see on the overall results given by statistics agencies, the candidate Hillary Clinton had the majority of popular vote with 43%. However, as can be seen on the map below, the majority of electors created the phenomenon known as swing states, states that voted for one party in an election and for the other party on the next. In the case of the 2016 election, the states of Ohio, North Carolina, and Florida, respectively with 18, 15, and 29 electors, were decisive in the final results of the election. Now, let's recap. Primaries and caucuses are held to choose a party's candidate. The final choice is made during national conventions. Then, candidates can campaign. American citizens vote in general elections, and the electors they choose then represent their state in the final tally of votes that will name the next president. Did you know? The USA is a country with two major political parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, and each of them is represented by an animal. The donkey for Democrats and the elephant for Republicans. These nicknames have, of course, an origin in history. The donkey was first used during the presidential campaign of 1828, when the candidate, Andrew Jackson, used it in his posters because of a derogatory nickname his opponents gave him. Likewise, the elephant first appeared in 1860 during Abraham Lincoln's election campaign, perhaps as a symbol of strength. Andrew Jackson was the seventh president of the USA. He's known for founding the Democratic Party, and he was president from 1829 to 1837. Weird coincidence. Jackson was a slave owner, whereas Abraham Lincoln was the president who abolished slavery in 1863, right in the middle of the Civil War that tore the nation. Abraham Lincoln was the 16th president of the USA. He served in office from 1861 to 1865 when he was assassinated. The Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. was dedicated to him on May 30th, 1922. Mount Rushmore in South Dakota features the carved heads of 4 famous presidents. From far left, George Washington. He was the first president of the USA. He led the American Revolutionary War to win independence from Great Britain. He is considered as the father of the new nation, and he helped lay the foundations for an American democracy. Next to him is Thomas Jefferson. He was the 3rd president of the USA and the primary author of the Declaration of Independence. He doubled the size of the country by purchasing the Louisiana Territory from France in 1803. The third one is Theodore Roosevelt. He worked to enlarge corporate monopolies and to ensure the right of the common working man. And as such, he represents the development of the USA. He was the 26th president and a Republican. Abraham Lincoln, 16th president of the USA, held the nation together during the Civil War, and he was also a Republican. He believed his most sacred duty was the preservation of the Union, and it was his firm conviction that slavery must be abolished. Family matters in the White House. 2 pairs of presidents had the same family name. Theodore Roosevelt, who was in office from 1901 to 1909 and was a Republican, and Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who was in office from 1933 to 1945 and was a Democrat. They were not from the same branch of the Roosevelt family, but Franklin Delano Roosevelt's wife was Theodore Roosevelt's niece. Despite political differences that caused family members to campaign against each other, their relationship remained friendly. The Bush family. On the left, George Bush. He was in office from 1989 to 1993, and he's a Republican. And George W. Bush in office from 2001 to 2009. The W stands for Walker, in case you're wondering. Do you see any likeness? Well, yes, of course, they are father and son. A rare occurrence. In this picture, 5 presidents posed together on the same picture. In January 2009, President George W. Bush invited the President-elect Barack Obama and the 3 other former presidents for lunch at the White House. On the far left, you have George Bush. Next to him is standing Barack Obama, who had not yet been inaugurated. Then in the middle is George W. Bush himself. The man next to him is Bill Clinton, who was in office from 1993 to 2001. and who is a Democrat. And on the far right is Jimmy Carter, who served in office from 1977 to 1981. He is also a Democrat.
Quiz time! Donkey or elephant? You're going to see the pictures of 8 presidents of the United States. If you remember what was said before, you will know which are Republicans and which are Democrats. Let's start in chronological order. Abraham Lincoln, Theodore Roosevelt, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, George Bush, Jimmy Carter, George W. Bush, Bill Clinton, and Barack Obama. Let's see if you got them right. On the left, with the Democrats, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Jimmy Carter, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama. And on the right, with the Republicans, Abraham Lincoln, Theodore Roosevelt, and George Bush, father and son. La minute vocabulaire se concentre sur le vocabulaire des élections. Citizens, les citoyens. To register, s'inscrire. Requirement, un prérequis. Ballot, vote. To support, soutenir. À la manière des supporters dans les rencontres sportives, par exemple. Nominees, les candidats nommés, ceux qui ont été choisis par le parti. Campaign, campagne électorale, et opponents, les concurrents. Le point de grammaire. Rappelez-vous, lors de la phase des collèges électoraux, the more populated the state, the more electors represent them in the electoral college system. Ce double comparatif est formé avec le the, suivi de la forme comparative en cas d'adjectif court et de more dans les autres cas, notamment si c'est une proposition, comme ici dans l'exemple. Cela signifie ici que plus l'État est peuplé, plus ils auront d'électeurs qui les représenteront lors des collèges électoraux. Pour illustrer cette règle dans un contexte un peu plus familier, je vous propose cette expression idiomatique « the more, the merrier ». The more sous-entend un nombre de personnes et l'adjectif merry signifie joyeux. Cette expression idiomatique, et donc typique à cette langue, a comme équivalent français « plus on est de fous, plus on rit ». Et pour terminer cette capsule, un petit message d'encouragement. The more you practice English, the less you hesitate to speak. Car le double comparatif fonctionne aussi dans un sens d'infériorité. Ici, plus on pratique l'anglais, moins on hésite à parler. Je vous laisse méditer là-dessus.